You gonna pick one? Which one are you gonna eat first? The marrow bone or the meat stick? That's also an interesting choice. Good! What will be for you? Morning! Magic Plus! And card collectors of all kinds! My dad has just stepped out for a little bit, and I'm going to try and take advantage of that opportunity to film this at home, because I think that's what's best for my puppy, since the heat is supposed to be pretty unbearable this week. So, I don't know how long he's going to be gone, so I'm going to do as much of this as I can now, and then I'm going to record the rest of it either later on this evening, when he's hopefully KO'd, and I'll have to add in the audio track another time, or I will do it hopefully tomorrow morning if we get up early enough. But for now, I figured you've got a chance to watch Kaiba eat a couple treats, and I'm going to try and do this deck profile as quickly as possible. If you've seen this deck, the symbol on this deck box, and you're familiar with it, it's because you love a game that is not Magic, but it is equally awesome. And that game is, of course, the phenomenal Dungeons and Dragons! Adventures in the Forgotten Realms is the Magic set, but Dungeons and Dragons is the original game, of course. It is a very cool game that I didn't get to play a lot of, but I have played some, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it the times that I have played it. And this is my Dungeons deck. I'm going to come up with a good name for it by tomorrow and have that fitted in somewhere over here beside Kaiba. But for now, I think it's just fitting to call it my Dungeons deck because this is the deck that has all the dungeons in it that I currently own. Which is something that I can finally say because for the longest time I could not get the Undercity into this deck because I did not have a card that would trigger that. But if you've been following my Dollarama Draws of Destiny polls and the few times that I've done it outside of that series for this series, for example, you will know that I recently pulled a really cool card that allows me to get the initiative? I think that's what it is called. And so once I can take that, then I can start the Undercity and get everybody else playing in the Undercity, and that is really fun. So, I'm just going to grab my drink from up on the counter before I begin this, because I have a feeling that I'm going to get dry mouth pretty quickly, especially if I'm going to do this as rapidly as I hope to. So, without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start with the commander, who is, of course, the guy on the box. I think it's a guy. Let me double check. There's no flavor text on this. Drats. Well, I apologize if this is a chick. Or a lady, I should say. I apologize if this is a lady, but I think it's a guy. And it is Sephiroth of the Hidden Ways. A white, a blue, and a black gets you a 2-3. No, a 3-3? No, a 2-3. I was right the first time. Reading it on the small camera is very hard to do. When one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you get to venture into the dungeon, but it only happens once per turn. And then whenever you complete a dungeon, you can return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This guy is fantastic for this deck. There is a card that I like a little bit better, but I don't like it as a commander overall. So I feel like this is the better option for sure, and that's why I am running it. I have, of course, the 4 dungeons that we are going to be able to go into. So we've got the Tomb of Annihilation. I might have to take them out of their shiny sleeves so you can see them a little bit better because they are also holographic, a lot of them. There we go. You got their Tomb of Annihilation, which is pretty cool. And if you can complete it, you end up with a very cool Death God. Next up, we have the Mad Mage Dungeon. This one's pretty cool. You can get some goblins out of it, you can get some skeletons out of it. You can do a whole bunch of exiling and scrying and stuff. And then I like the end of this one especially. You get to draw 3 cards, reveal them, and then you may sorry. Cast one of them without paying its mana cost. There we go. Now, I do have on the backside the other mine, but I like to have each of them have their own separate cards, so I also ended up getting my own copy of Lost Mine of Pandelver, which also lets you do some scrying, but it also gives you some goblins. It lets you make treasures. Lots of good stuff. The end result is kind of lame, you just get to draw a card. It does have a nice little skeleton token on the back of it. But I have other reasons, or other skeleton tokens to use, so that's the third dungeon. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the Undercity is finally in this deck, which is amazing. So what's fun about the Undercity is everybody gets to use this dungeon, whereas the other 3 are only for me. So I get to actually get people involved in the idea of the Dungeons and Dragons game by having everybody actually be part of a dungeon, if they are willing to take the initiative. And you get lots of good stuff from this one for sure, especially the end, of course, where Throne of the Dead 3, reveal the top 10 cards of your library, put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters on it, and it gets hexproof until your next turn, then you get to shuffle. That is insanely good. Of course, I have an initiative token on the backside of that one, which I just like that one because it explains the mechanic, essentially, but there's no other reason to really worry about having that. The rest of the tokens all came with the original precon. So we've got some zombies here that have illusions on the back. We've got some treasure tokens that have some clues on the back. We got a goblin with a clue and a couple more skeletons that also have illusions on the back. And yeah, let's get into the lands. What I love about the lands is all the lands have flavor text, which is insanely cool. The ideal goal would be to read all the flavor text to you guys, but I just don't think I'll have the time because I don't like it say know what my dad's up to, and I want to get through this all in one shot if I can. So I'll just read a few of them. Alarmed by the news you brought, the storm giant king of the Maelstrom has called his kin to council. That one's pretty cool. We got plains. Seeking to learn why the ancestors have fallen silent, you made your way to their ancient cairns. As you trudge through the sewers of Baldur's Gate, it dawns on you. Where are all the rats? Searching for a vanished caravan that was bound for Silvery Moon, you've come to a blank, mysterious fog. Venturing beneath the desert sands, you've discovered an alien power pulsing with inconceivable energy. After careful study, you've determined that the giant runes serve to track the movement of the planets, and they will soon align once more. And we'll do this last swamp. As a plague ravages the world above, you've made your way into the Underdark in search of a fungal panacea. But I mean, there's lots of really cool flavor text on all of these, to be honest. And most of them are all like either original or at least there's only like a couple copies of each. So like you actually have fairly decent amount of like fun stuff here. That one I obviously added in after the fact since it's hollow. But it is a Dungeon and Dragon land, so it does still fit the theme. And then we get into the dual lands. We've got a Dark Water Catacombs, Nimbus Maze, Clouded Estuary, Port Town, Sunken Hollow, Prairie Stream, Ozolith Basilica, Azorius Chancery, Demir Aqueduct, all really good ones because they let you return a land. Esper Panorama, which is nice because it lets me fetch whichever one I'm severely slacking in, but also still taps for colorless if I want. I love High Market. This is probably my favorite land in this deck because it's a nice little Sake outlet that also lets me gain a life. So it works really well with my commander, which I'm pointing at, but you can't see because I have the camera angled in such a way. So let me just grab that for you. If my commander, as I mentioned earlier, sees something die, then I get to venture in the dungeon. So this is just a really cheap way to venture into the dungeon for free and gain an extra life, which is nice. We got our command tower, classic for every commander deck that they ever made, precon at least. Not all of mine actually have one because I just don't have enough precons that I've ever bought. Exotic Orchard. Arcane Sanctum, I really thought about taking this out, but it just looks so good for the D&D theme, and I think it fits really well with my commander. Like, it looks like she or he would really hang out there. And then the last two I added in are two that I've pulled from packs of D&D. Hallamir Depths. Enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you may look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order, which is cool, and it taps for blue. And I have a Cave of the Frost Dragons, which isn't very, like, expensive or anything, but it fits the theme so well, I had to include it in here, rather than put it in my Dragons deck. If you control 2 or more other lands, this thing enters the battlefield tapped, so you want to get this thing out early. And if you can pay 4 and a white, this thing becomes a 3/4 dragon with flying until end of turn, which is pretty cool. And those are the lands. If at some point this video suddenly abruptly stops, part 2 will continue wherever it continues, but you know why it's stopping. Because I'm going to just have to quit and pack up all the stuff before he walks through the door as quickly as possible. Fate's Reversal, return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, venture into the dungeon, very nice. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to you and creatures you control this turn. Safe Passage is pretty good. Bar the Gate is nice, because you can counter a creature or planeswalker spell and then venture into the dungeon as well. Victimize lets me get a couple creatures back as long as I'm willing to sacrifice something, so I get to trigger my commander in addition. Return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This one is nice because it has a flashback, so I can play it twice. And again, a lot of these are going to be D&D stuff. There's very few things that I've added in here that are not actually D&D cards, because I really wanted to try and keep this on theme. This would be an example of one of the ones that I definitely think feels D&D, but is not actually from that set. Rescue from the Underworld. As long as an additional cost to cast this, you sacrifice a creature, then you can choose a creature card in your graveyard, return that creature and the one you sacrificed to the battlefield at the beginning of your next upkeep. So that's pretty cool. Feels very D&D to me, in my opinion. This one's actually a Warhammer card, but again, just feels so on point. Counter target spell, activate ability, or triggered ability. Its controller loses life equal to the number of creatures you control. Feels very, like, party-ish, even though this deck is not party-focused, but... Swords to Plowshares came with this deck, and I love the artwork on this one. The smallest seed of regret can bloom into redemption. Counterspell, I'm not sure if this one actually originally had a counterspell in it or not. I can't remember from the original deck list, but I love the artwork on this one, so I added it in here. Fell the Mighty felt like a really good card for this deck. It has the whole angel-ish looking thing going on. I think that's actually the Sun Titan, to be honest. But I could be wrong. Necromantic Selection came with the deck, and is probably one of my favorite board wipes in the entire game, because it lets you pick any random creature, bring it back that you like, and you get to make it a zombie, which I love. Revivify, 2 and a white, roll a d20, add the number of creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. Oh, and add that to the total. And then 1 to 14, return all creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn to your hand, or you get to put them all back onto the battlefield if it's 15 or higher, which is pretty cool. So if you, like, played, say, Fell the Mighty and wiped out your whole board and then played Revivify afterwards, you could probably bring back most of your stuff while wiping out your opponents. And finally, Grave Endeavor is the last instant or sorcery card. Roll 2d10, choose 1 result, return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to that result, then each opponent loses X life and you gain X life where X is the other result, which is kind of cool. So the creature card, no matter what, you get to pick whatever one you want, which is nice. You don't have to worry. I'm just trying to get it to focus, but it doesn't really want to. I'm sorry about that. There, we'll just bring the text super close. So what I like about this one is it doesn't matter what creature you pick, you get to pick for regardless. The counters are just the result of the first dice, and the second dice just determines how much life everyone loses and you gain, which is cool. It also came with the deck as well, but I'm just very fond of that sorcery, or instant card, I mean. Next up, we'll do some artifacts, and then I believe it's just, or artifacts and enchantments, and then I believe it's just the creatures, and we're out of the deck at least. Whether we have time to do the package 2 or not, I don't know, but we'll try. Arcane Signet, classic. Soul Ring, classic. Sunclasp is an add-in by me. Enchanted creature has +1/+3, which I really like because it beefs up the heck out of my commander if I want to put it on there. And then I can pay white to return that creature to my hand. So while I will lose the aura, that aura is going to go to the graveyard, unfortunately. It's a great way to save my commander. First grade of the day. And I've been really good about not using that word lately, so I think I'm okay to use it every now and again now. But yeah, so this would essentially make my commander into a 3/6, which is pretty beefed up, so she can hang out on the field much stronger, and it gives her a lifeline to survive and not cost me commander tax, essentially. I added an Explorer Scope because, if I remember correctly, I think there's only 34 lands in here. There might be a little bit more. Can't remember what the updated total was. The original total was much lower. I think it was like 31. $35, pardon me. 35 lands. Not so bad. For me, at least. Like I say, I think the original total was 31, so I've upgraded it enough that I think it's playable, and I think Explorer Scope is just a very helpful tool to get things across. That one is also an add-in by me. Now we're going back to the stuff that was in there originally. Delver's Torch is nice, +1/+1. Equip creature attacks, you get to venture into the dungeon. The equip cost is a little expensive, but I mean, it's worth it for what you do. Fly, enchanted creature has flying, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you get to venture into a dungeon, so beautiful because it gives evasion and lets you venture. 50 feet of rope is solid because it deals with the wall thing, which I only have that one walls deck, but I could play this deck against the walls deck and be really super awesome against it. Target creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Probably not using that one either. The big thing I like about this one is you can pay 4, tap it, and venture into the dungeon, so it's just another way to get a venture into the dungeon trigger. The faster you get through the dungeons, the more benefit you get off of some of the other cards, so that's the main reason for this. Same reason why I'm including Dungeon Map. It does tap for a mana at least, but the main function of it in here is to give me another tool to venture. Through thorough investigation, 2 and a white. Whenever you attack, you get to investigate, so you get to make clues. And whenever you sacrifice clues, you get to venture into the dungeon. Insanely good card in this deck. Because clues, in case you're not familiar with the game, you pay 2, sacrifice this, and then you get to draw a card, which is insanely valuable when you're like mana screwed or you need like a good creature or something. Lightning Greaves is fantastic for my commander as well. Gives it Shroud and Haste, so that would be terrific to prevent anybody from targeting it. Propaganda. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each attacking creature they control that's attacking you. So essentially, if they don't save a whole bunch of mana, I'm pretty much safe as long as I can keep this on the field. The last 4 cards are all really cool equipment cards that I like. Wand of Orcus. Whenever the equipped creature attacks or blocks, it and zombies you control gain Death Touch until end of turn, and whenever your equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you get to make that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. Rod of Absorption. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, exile it instead of putting it into a graveyard, and then you can pay X, tap this, and this thing you sacrifice this thing, and then you can cast any number of the spells that have been exiled this thing with total mana value X or less without paying their mana costs. So, unfortunately, it's not like every spell under 5 is solid. You would have to pick a number of spells that add up to 5 in total if X was 5. But still a really cool card to have in this deck. Immovable Rod. You can choose to not untap this thing if you want, and then whenever you untap this thing, you get to venture into the dungeon. You pay 3 and a white, tap this thing, and as long as it remains tapped, whatever target permanent you choose loses all abilities and can't attack or block. So this thing deals with a really pesky creature on my opponent's side of the board, but if I want to pay the cost each turn, I also get to venture into the dungeon each turn, which is nice. And finally, Maul of the Skyclaves, 2 and a white. When this thing enters the battlefield, you get to attach it automatically to a creature, which is nice because the equip cost is a little expensive at 2 and 2 white. But the equipped creature gets +2/+2 flying and first strike, so it's a pretty solid card for this deck when there are some creatures in here that really depend on being able to attack in order to trigger the dungeon, or dealing damage in order to trigger venturing into the dungeon. Alright, on to the creatures. As I mentioned, one of my new favorite cards in this deck, Passageway Seer, 3 and a black. 2/2, so it's a little expensive to put this thing into play, but it has lifelink, and it does the one thing that I really wanted to do with this deck forever, which is start the initiative. Once you take the initiative, you get to start the Undercity dungeon, which is really cool because you can only do one of the other 3 at a time, but the Undercity can go at the exact same time as all 3 of those other ones, so it doesn't matter which one you're running. Once you get this on board, you can start the Undercity, which is cool. And then at the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on this thing. So the turn that this thing comes into play, chances are you're going to still have the initiative, so it's going to become a 3/3 at least. And then obviously you want to take back the initiative by dealing combat damage. I think it's combat damage you have to deal? Yeah. You have to deal combat damage to the player who has initiative, and then you get to trigger the venture again on your end phase. Next up, we got Reckless Scholar. This one's just really nice because it taps to draw a card and discard a card, so it lets me get through the deck a little faster to get the things I need, particularly lands. I like Mortis Strider. These are all cards that I've added in that are not technically Dungeons & Dragons cards. What I love about Mortis Strider is it returns to your hand whenever it dies, so if you're sacrificing it each time, you only have to pay 3 to put it back on the board, sacrifice it next turn, etc., etc. Very nice little guy. I like having him around in this deck. Valgavos Faithful is a solid add-in into this deck because, again, it triggers the sacrifice ability of my commander, and it allows me to return a creature card from my graveyard to the battlefield, which is insane. So the cost of 1 black for a 1/1 is fantastic. The cost of the ability is a little bit expensive, but it does everything I want to do in this deck, so it is the perfect add-in. Denethor, Ruling Steward, is a fun one to have in this deck. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control this turn, you get to create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token, which I forgot to add into this deck, so I've got to make sure I grab one of those before I play this deck. And then pay 2, sacrifice another creature, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life, so it's another sack outlet for me. In addition to that, I'm also getting a 1/1 white human creature token each time that I go to trigger my commander's abilities, so very nice, very nice. And then, of course, Ellis Ilkor, Sadistic Pilgrim, is a perfect addition to this deck because, 1, Death Touch is one of my favorite mechanics, as everybody knows, if you've been following this for a while. Probably my actual favorite mechanic of all. And then, in addition to that, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under my control, I gain a life. Whenever a creature under my control dies, everybody loses a life except me. So, all the sacrificing I want to do in this deck is going to do very nice things for this. And in addition to that, I'm going to be gaining a bunch of life from all the different tokens that I'm bringing in, which is very, very good. Ranger's Hawk is pretty expensive, to be honest, for what it does. Because of that, I've considered dropping this one for a land, but I just love the bird. And there are like 3 or 4 different birds in here, so I figure leave them all in. It's a 1/1 for 1, so it's cheap to get on board, but the ability is 3 to tap it and then tap another untapped creature you control, and that's when you get to venture. So you have to end up tapping 2 creatures in order to venture and pay 3 mana. That's a lot. So probably not triggering it as much and probably using it just to do battle damage a lot of the time, but Steadfast Paladin, 2/2 with lifelink for 1 and a white. That one's a pretty nice one. Now we're into all the D&D cards, by the way. In case the camera isn't focusing enough to get the symbol in. Ronom Unicorn? I like this little one. It's sad looking, but it does a really good thing, because it triggers my commander when it sacrifices itself, and it lets me destroy an enchantment if somebody has something that's bothersome on the board. I wish it hit artifacts and enchantments, but again, I wanted to keep more D&D cards in here, so that's why I didn't replace it with something that does that. Gloomstalker, 2 and a white for a 2/3. If you've completed one of the dungeons, this thing has double strike. So again, this is one of those cards where if you can get through a dungeon fast enough, when you get this thing on board, now you're swinging for essentially 4 damage per turn, and 2 of it hits before anybody can hit this thing back. So very nice, very nice. Shortcut Seeker. A little expensive to get it on board, but it is a 2/5, so I mean, it's going to stay there for a while unless somebody has something really good to hit it with. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get to venture into the dungeon, so very nice. If you can give that one flying, for example, you're pretty solid. Another creature with Death Touch that I love, Yuan Ti Fangblade. 2/2 for 2 and a black. And whenever this thing deals combat damage to a player, you also venture into the dungeon. So there's lots of different ways to venture into the dungeon, as I said in this deck. That's the goal, of course. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, you get to venture into the dungeon. So this one is really cool because it actually triggers my commander's ability essentially twice if it's on board. Burnished Heart. Normally I pull this for most decks, but because of what it's doing, I really like this one. First off, it's fetching me a couple of lands when it dies, which is nice. But the big thing is, I pay 3 to sacrifice it, so it triggers my commander. It also triggers that one that I just showed you. And so I'm getting basically 2 venture triggers if I have both those guys on board. Cloister Gargoyle. I'm not a huge fan of Cloister Gargoyle. Again, this is one of those ones that's just mainly in here because of what it does. When it enters the battlefield, it ventures into the dungeon, which is nice. As long as you've completed a dungeon, this thing has +3, +0, and flying. But mainly I'm going to use this one as a blocker early on. Let it die, trigger my commander, trigger my other guy. Does my commander demand a sacrifice, or it can just be whenever something dies? So whenever a creature is put in my graveyard from anywhere. Okay, so it could even be discarding, which is cool, but I'm not doing discarding. This one's one of those ones that I can bring back a bunch, though, which is nice. So I can trigger the venture into the dungeon each time I bring it back. Because basically anything with 3 mana or less is potentially a target for me to bring back repeatedly onto the battlefield in this deck. A lot easier than some of the other ones. When Playcrafter enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Anybody who can't has to discard a card. I like this guy because hopefully I'm not going to sacrifice him right away when he comes in, but if I do, I do. But he does let me trigger my commander, of course, and he does do that thing that annoys everyone else. Reassembling Skeleton, much like the Mortis Strider, this one is a fun little one to get back from the graveyard on a regular basis. The only difference is this one actually costs 1 and a black to bring it back to your hand, whereas Mortis Strider just automatically goes. But it has to already be on the battlefield when it goes, whereas this one can be returned because it got discarded or whatever, doesn't matter. Displacer Beast, I like this one because it has the enter the battlefield thing just like the other one did, but this one actually I can return to my hand if I pay the cost. So essentially I can trigger this one once per turn if I really want to pay the amount of mana, which is quite expensive. That ends up being 7 mana in total, but still a fun little cat beast, sorry. Murder of Crows, another one of those birds that I could pull, but I like the birds in this set. I really do. Costs 3 and 2 blue, which is expensive for a 4/4, but it does have flying, and whenever a creature dies, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So it is giving you a lot of value, potentially. This is the one that I was talking about that I would love to make my actual commander, except for the fact that it's only blue-white. So I would have to get rid of all the black stuff in this deck, and that would really kind of suck because all the black cards in here are really cool. Trying to get it to focus. There we go. Hama Pashar Runeseeker. Oh my goodness, will you focus? For 1 blue and a white, you get a 2/3, and what it does is simply it triggers all the room abilities of the dungeons you own an additional time. So if this guy's out and you venture into the dungeon, whatever room you get into, you're going to do that ability twice. So if it's scrying, you're going to scry the same amount 2 times, etc., etc. It's a really fun card to have on the field if you can keep it out there. But like I say, it doesn't have black in the mana pool, so it can't be the commander for this deck, unfortunately. Obsessive Stitcher. I was surprised when I realized that this actually came from this set originally, because this is a fantastic card. 1 blue and black, gives you a 0/3, tap to draw a card and discard a card, much like the other one that I showed you earlier. But in addition to that, I can pay 2 blue and a black, tap this one, sacrifice it, and return any creature from my graveyard to the battlefield. Which, as you're going to see, the further we get into this stack, there's some stuff that I really want to return to the battlefield. For example, this one. When it enters the battlefield, it ventures into the dungeon, which is nice, but also, whenever it attacks, you can return up to 1 creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield if you've completed a dungeon. So essentially, if you've completed 1 dungeon, you can pull back anything with mana value 3 or less repeatedly every time you attack with this, which is insanely good. Karmic Guide. This one's a little expensive, but this is one of those ones that would be fun to bring back. The echo is what is annoying on this one, to be perfectly honest. It's flying and protection from black for 3 and 2 white. You also have to pay 3 and 2 white the following turn to keep it in play if you want to. When it enters the battlefield, you return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, so that is nice. If you don't want to pay the extra cost, essentially you're just getting rid of a 2/2 with flying and protection from black. But, I mean, if somebody's playing mono black, you can swing at them for free with this thing, which is fun. Solemn Simulacrum is a classic include into any deck. Sad Robot, as we all know him by. When he enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle, which is fantastic because, like I say, searching for lands is always good in this deck. And when it dies, you get to draw a card. So he's a good target for sacrificing as well. This is the one that is the main reason why we have all those illusion tokens. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, you get to make a blue illusion token. And those illusion tokens have this additional ability that they get +1/+0 for each other illusion you control. So the more illusions, the better it is for you. Whenever an illusion you control dies, you may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to that creature's power from your hand onto the battlefield without having to pay the cost, which is insanely good. Doomed Necromancer, another one that's a fantastic target, like another one. Mana value 3, mana value 3. Pay black, tap, sacrifice this thing, return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this one will let you fetch back one of the more expensive ones, and then you can get this one back to the battlefield by playing the abilities of the cheaper ones. Phantasmal Image, 1 and a blue. It enters the battlefield as a copy of any other creature on the battlefield except it's an illusion in addition to its other types, and when it becomes a target of a spell or ability, you have to sacrifice it, so it will trigger my commander automatically when that happens, but kind of cool otherwise. Another illusion, Phantom Steed, so these will help support those other illusions that are coming to play. This one's a 4/3, so it's a little bit better for the mana cost. It has flash, which is nice. Winters, you get to exile another target creature you control until this thing leaves the battlefield, which is kind of crazy. But when you do, you get to then, whenever this thing attacks, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of the exiled creature, except it's an illusion in addition to its other types, and then you have to sacrifice it at the end of the combat. So, I mean, as long as you don't target something that is actually legendary, you're going to get a whole bunch of ETB triggers potentially. Like, you could pick one of the ones that has the enter the battlefield, venture into the dungeon ability, and then just keep spamming that constantly whenever this thing attacks. That's pretty cool. There's lots of other ones too, so I'm really happy with that one as an add-in to this deck. Baleful Strix is a classic for any deck that is running blue and black. Flying Death Touch, when it enters battlefield, you get to draw a card. It's a 1/1 for blue and black, so nice. Nadar Selfless Paladin is probably one of the best cards in this deck, and I'm so glad I pulled a copy of this. is a 3/3 with vigilance. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to venture into the dungeon, so you're getting a lot of ventures. And other creatures you get control get +1/+1 as long as you've completed a dungeon. So I don't think that adds on. Like, if you completed 3 dungeons, I don't think you get +3/+3, but you're still getting a solid value out of this thing, and it's getting you through the dungeons so much faster than a lot of the other stuff does in this deck. Triumphant Adventurer. For a white and a black, you get a Death Touch 1/1, and as long as it's your turn, you have First Strike, like this creature does, I mean. And whenever it attacks, you get to venture into the dungeon as well. So another one that's giving you lots of venture triggers off of the attacks, and another one that's cheap enough that you can bring it back with a whole bunch of the abilities in this deck. Midnight Pathlighter, 2/3 for 2, a blue and a white. Creatures you control can't be blocked except by legendary creatures. This one's insane. This is one of those ones that I want to bring back with the more with the creatures that have the ability to bring back anything, because this one is phenomenal. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get to venture into the dungeon, so another one that's venturing. Radiant Solar, I thought about pulling this out, to be honest, but I really like this one, so I left it in. Flying Lifelink 3/6 for 5 and a white. It's expensive to get it on the battlefield, but whenever it or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get to venture into the dungeon, which is nice. And in addition to that, you can pay a white and discard this to venture into the dungeon and gain 3 life. So in a pinch, you can get this into the graveyard, still trigger your commander's ability, and then you can use one of the other card's abilities to actually revive this thing for nothing. This is the big boy of the deck, of course, Sun Titan. 4 and 2 white for a Vigilance 6/6. Whenever it enters a battlefield or attacks, you can return a target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Note, it says permanent, not creature. Now, what I want to point out about that is the best card probably in this deck, to be perfectly honest, even though it's not one of my favorite ones, it's definitely the best card, I think, by far, is the Propaganda, which does only cost 2 and a blue. So Sun Titan can get this back every time it attacks, which is very annoying for other people. And that's the reason why people try to clear Sun Titan as much as possible, and why there's so many cards in here that will let me get Sun Titan back to the battlefield if need be. Acererak, the Archlich, 2 and a black. Another one's easy to get back onto the battlefield if need be, for 5/5, which is insane. But the problem is if it enters the battlefield and you haven't completed the Tomb of Annihilation, which is the one that ends with the crazy god. Just trying to find it so I can show you. This one here. If you haven't completed this dungeon yet, this guy automatically kills himself. Or no, he just goes back to your hand, and you venture into the dungeon instead. Pardon me. I thought you had to sacrifice him. And then whenever he attacks, for each opponent, you get to make a 2/2 black zombie creature token unless that player sacrifices a creature. So you're going to get a whole bunch of zombies with this guy. And if you can combine this guy with that crazy wand that I showed you earlier, you're going to get a whole crazy more bunch of zombies, and they're all going to have Death Touch. And then the last creature in this deck, which is another powerhouse for this deck for sure, is the Cataclysm Gearhulk for 3 and 2 white. A Vigilant 4/5, and whenever it enters the battlefield, each player chooses 1 artifact, 1 creature, 1 enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control, and then they have to sacrifice everything else. So this is another board wipey card that is just really cruel to have in this deck, but it's a fun one. And that concludes my Dungeons & Dragons deck, which, as I say, I'm still not 100% sure exactly what I want to call it. Thinking like something along the lines of diving into dungeons or something like that, or I don't know. It needs something cool, something flavorful as a name. Kaiba's over by the door sleeping in the sun. I'm actually surprised my dad left the screen open and is okay with it. He doesn't have the heat up or the air conditioning on, obviously, yet, but he's usually against overheating the house. Anywho, I'm going to try and crack this really quick and get through it, and then make my lunch, and get Kaiba out for a afternoon W. So we'll crack this. We got some sleeves, so we're just going to show you the sleeves first. They are green. unfortunate. I was hoping for another pack of white, to be honest, but I will take green. And we've got our 3 packs. We've got a 10-card pack, a 6-card packet uncommon, uncommons pack, and a 4-card with a guaranteed rare. Okay. Do the 10-card one first. See if we get anything cool. Starting off with a mountain, which I like the artwork on that mountain. Very nice. Tide Hollow Scholar. Artifact creature zombie. Ooh, that's cool. 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it. Exile that card. Ooh, nice. When this thing leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to its owner's hand. Ooh, not so nice. But I do like that first ability. Is that a legendary? No, darn. Elf Salamander Rogue. That's an odd combination. 5 and a green for a 7/4. Can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, and it has Encore 4 and a green. So you have to pay an extra 4 and a green the second turn to keep it into play. Kinda crazy. Not sure if I'm going to play that one or not. Traveling Philosopher, 1 and a white. It is really powerful. I'm not going to say it's not. It's the Encore cost that's a little unfortunate. For a 2/2 with some flavor. No problems there. Ooh, we got an Elvish Mystic in full art. Nice. I love her. She's one of my favorite mana dorks, and that's my favorite artwork of her, actually. So really good to have an extra copy of that. Prosperous Pirates, 4 and a blue for a 3/4. When it enters battlefield, you get to make 2 treasure tokens. Nice. And I do want to make a Pirates deck, so I don't think I had that one yet, so good pull. Incurable Augur, a 5/1 for 3 and a red. I'm not going to lie, it's hard to come up with something positive to say about this one, but I do like the art and flavor text of it. Probably never going to run it because it's a 5/1, but I am going to eventually build a mono red deck, and maybe it will have a place in there. Who knows? Goblin Tunneler is a nice one. A 1/1 for 1 and a red. Tap, and target creature with power 2 or less becomes unblockable for a turn. Solid for any Goblin deck, but also any deck that's running low power creatures. Ooh, a second land, Ashbarrens, sorry. Taps for colorless. Land cycling 1. Which is pretty good. Pretty good. And Volsci Tide Turner. 1 and a blue for a 1/3. Tap for blue. You have to use it for an instant or sorcery spell or a kicked spell. Curious. Okay. Next up. I've never ate either of the treats. 6-pack. Starting with Death Priest of Miracle. Thieving Cleric. Skeletons, vampires, and zombies you control get +1/+1. Ooh, cool. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, you may pay 1. If you do, create a 1/1 black skeleton creature. Oh, I know exactly what deck I want to put this in. That's an awesome card. I have a mono black deck that's going to thrive in. It is also a D&D card, so I could put it in my D&D deck that I just showed you guys, but I'm probably not going to do that, to be honest, because there's not a lot of vampires in it. Jawari Disruption, 1 and a blue for a counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. It's also a land that taps for blue, so very versatile and very nice addition. Ooh, a new snow creature! Yay! When we get to the snow deck, this is going to be going in there for sure. 2, a green and 2 blue. Changeling, you may have this thing enter the battlefield as a copy of a permanent you control, except it's a legendary and snow in addition to its other types. And if it's a creature, it enters with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it and has Changeling. Very cool. Very, very cool. I like that a lot. Dryad's Revival. That might be my favorite pull of the day, but this 6-pack is insanely good right now. Dryad's Revival, 2 and a green, return target creature, just target card, from your graveyard to your hand. Ooh, and it has flashback. That's insanely good. Woo! Trumpeting Gnar. It's a mutate creature. I'm not sure if I have this one yet or not, but I do have to update my mutant deck soon, and I don't think I have this one at least in 4. 1 a green and a blue, mutate 3 a green and 3 and 2 green or blue in any combination. Whenever it mutates, you get to make a 3/3 green beast token. I'm pretty sure I do have this one actually, but definitely not in this version of the art. So, loving the art on this one. And another Dreadhound! Dreadhound is one of my favorite creatures for sure in black. Enters the battlefield, you end up milling 3 cards, which is pretty good in black more often than not. And whenever a creature dies or is put into a graveyard from the library, each opponent has to lose a life, which is insane. Alright, that 6-pack was fire. And now, the 4-pack. And then I need to pack all this stuff up super quick and take it back upstairs before my dad comes home. Alright. Starting with a Temple of Triumph, which is always nice to have an extra copy of. And this one's a Fallout one, so I like the art because I don't think I have that version. Very cool, very cool. Sphinx's Insight. 2, a white and a blue, draw 2 cards. If you cast a spell during your main phase, you gain 2 life as well. Ooh, nice. That's a really cool card. And I do have a deck that I'm going to be building in the near future that focuses a lot on card draws, so good to have that one. Scuttletide. Pay 1, discard a card, create a 0/3 blue crab creature token. Crabs you control get +1/+1 as long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. For 1 and blue, you're essentially just making a whole bunch of tokens. Interesting. The downside is you don't get to draw, so unless you have some way to put cards back into your hand on a regular basis, this thing's going to kill your hand really fast if you want to use it effectively. And finally, an Elvish Warrior, a 2/3 for 2 green. Pretty straightforward. Nice art on it. Is it old school? No, 2014. My tales of war are the stories most asked for around the fires at night, but they're the ones I care least to tell. That is cool flavor text. And this has been a really fun Super Deck Sunday video. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to be putting this out on actual today or whether I'll be putting it out on Monday morning, simply because I still have a whole bunch of editing to do for the Sunday Park Trip video, and I did promise I would get that out today before the end of the day. But if I do get this out tonight, solid, thumbs up. And if not, you'll get to enjoy it tomorrow morning before the Monday Park Trip video comes out. Alright, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day whenever you get to see this, and that your week is a good one as well. I've had a pretty rough couple weeks, so I'm trying to see the positives, and quick shout out at the end of this to Gaming Grandma, because she talked me into doing some filming today when I was pretty bummed out and was pretty certain I was not going to do anything. So thank you for that, Gaming Grandma. Love you very much for that. And we also love all of you guys for watching. So, without further ado, much love to you all from Cap of the Puck and myself to you. Take care. And thanks for watching one more time. Stumbling over my words. Yes, Kaiba. You're telling me to stop talking. Okay. Love you.